April 17, 1943. 27,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. The sky trembled with the roar of engines. A formation of B-24 Liberators cut through the clouds, their silver wings glinting against the pale sun. Inside one of them, sweat dripped from the brow of Lieutenant James "Red" Harrison as he gripped the yoke. The bomber shook violently under bursts of flak, black puffs exploding around the fuselage like angry thunderheads. Below, German officers stationed at the anti-aircraft command post squinted upward. Colonel Franz Müller, a veteran of the Luftwaffe, raised his binoculars. He counted 1, 2, 3, 20 bombers in tight formation, each bristling with .50 caliber machine guns. His jaw tightened. "Liberators," he muttered. "Too many of them." The Germans had grown accustomed to American daylight raids, but what unsettled Müller was not just the number of aircraft. It was the speed at which they seemed to multiply. Every week, more squadrons appeared, as if conjured from thin air. Prisoners of war whispered rumors. The Americans were building bombers faster than the Reich could shoot them down. Inside Harrison's Liberator, the crew worked like a single organism. Sergeant O'Malley manned the top turret, firing bursts at a Messerschmitt Bf 109 diving from above. The rattle of the guns echoed through the fuselage. "He's breaking off," O'Malley shouted, his voice drowned by the engines. The Liberator's bomb bay doors opened. A mechanical groan filled the cabin as the payload released, tons of explosives tumbling toward the industrial heart of Bremen. The city below erupted in fire and smoke. German officers at the command post staggered as the ground shook beneath them. Colonel Müller lowered his binoculars, his face pale. "How many more can they send?" he whispered to his adjutant. The young officer hesitated, then replied, "Herr Oberst, they say America built 18 of these in a single day." Muller's eyes widened. 18 in one day? He struggled to comprehend the scale. In Germany, even the most efficient factories could not dream of such output. The thought gnawed at him. If the Americans truly had such power, the Reich's war machine was already doomed. Above the chaos, Harrison steadied his bomber, guiding it back toward England. The crew exhaled, exhausted but alive. They did not know it yet, but their very existence was part of a larger miracle unfolding thousands of miles away, in a place called Willow Run, Michigan. Ypsilanti, Michigan. Early 1941. The chill of winter clung to the air as Henry Ford stood inside a cavernous structure that seemed more like a cathedral than a factory. Steel beams stretched overhead, and the floor beneath him was still raw concrete. This was Willow Run, his gamble, his vision, his answer to America's call for war production. Ford's engineers moved like ants across the vast space, laying out blueprints, measuring assembly lines, and marking the positions where machines would soon roar to life. Unlike traditional aircraft plants, which relied on skilled craftsmen and slow, meticulous assembly, Willow Run was designed to mimic the automobile industry's greatest achievement, the moving production line. The plan was audacious. Instead of building one bomber at a time, Ford intended to roll them out like Model Ts. A B-24 Liberator, an aircraft with a 110-foot wingspan for engines and over 1 million individual parts, would be assembled piece by piece as it moved down the line. Workers would specialize in single tasks, repeating them with precision until the bomber reached the end of the mile-long factory floor. At first, skeptics scoffed. "You can't mass-produce airplanes like cars," one aviation expert sneered. Even the Army Air Forces doubted Ford's vision. But Ford's lieutenants, men like Charles Sorensen, believed otherwise. Sorensen, nicknamed Cast Iron Charlie, walked the floor with a cigar clenched between his teeth, barking orders. He had already revolutionized automobile manufacturing. Now he would do the same for warplanes. By mid-1942, the factory was alive. The air thundered with the pounding of rivet guns, the hiss of welding torches, and the rumble of conveyor belts. Thousands of workers, Men, women, immigrants, farmers streamed into Willow Run each day. Rosie the Riveter was no longer just a poster. She was real, standing shoulder to shoulder with men, tightening bolts on the wings of a bomber destined for Europe. The scale was staggering. Willow Run stretched nearly a mile long, its roof covering more than 3.5 million square feet. Inside, the Liberator took shape like a mechanical giant being born. Fuselages slid forward, wings were hoisted into place, engines lowered with cranes. At the far end, the completed bomber rolled out into the sunlight, its olive-drab skin gleaming. And then came the breakthrough, 1 bomber per hour. 18 in a single day. The numbers defied imagination. For the Germans, who struggled to replace aircraft lost in combat, the thought was terrifying. Captured officers, interrogated by Allied intelligence, shook their heads in disbelief. Impossible, they muttered. No nation can build planes like this. But America could, and Willow Run proved it. Summer 1943. Willow Run, Michigan. The factory floor thundered like a living beast. Conveyor belts rattled, cranes swung overhead, and the air was thick with the smell of oil and hot steel. Workers in denim overalls and bandanas moved in rhythm, each responsible for a single task: riveting, wiring, welding. The repetition was hypnotic, but the result was extraordinary. A B-24 Liberator rolling off the line every 60 minutes. At the far end of the mile-long assembly line, a bomber emerged into daylight. Its nose art was still fresh, paint glistening under the sun. A test pilot climbed aboard, engines roaring to life. Within minutes, the aircraft lifted from the runway, another war machine bound for Europe. And even as it disappeared into the sky, another Liberator was already being wheeled out behind it. The numbers were staggering. 18 bombers in a single day, over 650 in a single month. By the end of the war, Willow Run would produce more than 8,600 Liberators, nearly half of all B-24s ever built. For the men fighting in Europe, this industrial miracle was invisible. They only saw the endless formations of bombers filling the sky. But for captured German officers, interrogated in Allied camps, the truth was devastating. When told of Willow Run's output, many refused to believe it. No factory can build aircraft like automobiles, one Luftwaffe colonel scoffed. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Squadrons of Liberators arriving faster than the Reich could replace its losses. Inside the German High Command, reports circulated of America's industrial might. Generals compared it to their own factories, where shortages of aluminum, fuel, and skilled labor slowed production to a crawl. In Germany, building a single bomber could take weeks. In America, it took hours. The contrast was crushing. Back at Willow Run, the workers knew the stakes. Every rivet, every bolt, every wire was a blow against tyranny. Women who had never touched a wrench before now tightened bolts on wing spars. Farmers who once plowed fields now assembled engines. Immigrants who had fled Europe now built the machines that would liberate it. The rhythm of production became a heartbeat of war. 1 bomber per hour. One more chance for the Allies to strike. One more symbol of America's unstoppable momentum. Autumn 1943. A prisoner of war camp in England. The interrogation room was dimly lit, its walls lined with maps of Europe and photographs of Allied aircraft. A German Luftwaffe officer, Major Dieter Kraus, sat stiffly at the table, his uniform worn and his eyes hollow from defeat. Across from him, an American intelligence officer slid a sheet of paper forward. On it was a report. Ford's Willow Run plant produces 18 B-24 bombers in a single day. Kraus read the words slowly, his lips tightening. 18 in one day. He shook his head. Mean. That is propaganda. The American leaned back, folding his arms. It's not propaganda, Major. It's fact. 1 bomber per hour. Every day. Kraus's mind raced. He had seen the skies over Bremen, Hamburg, and Cologne filled with Liberators. He had watched squadrons blot out the sun, their bomb bays opening like jaws of steel. But he had always assumed Germany could match the pace, that the Reich's factories could keep up. Now, confronted with the truth, he felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. In Berlin, similar reports reached the desks of high command. Generals pored over intelligence briefings, comparing them to their own production figures. At Heinkel and Junkers plants, shortages of aluminum and fuel slowed assembly. Skilled labor was scarce, diverted to the front lines. A single bomber could take weeks to complete. The contrast was humiliating. Colonel Franz Müller, the officer who had once stared in disbelief at the liberators above Bremen, now sat in a debriefing room, his voice low. "We cannot fight a nation that builds planes like automobiles," he admitted. "Every loss we suffer is replaced before the day ends. For us, every loss is a wound that takes weeks to heal." The psychological impact was devastating. German officers began to realize that the war was not just fought in the skies or on the ground. It was fought in factories, in assembly lines, in the relentless rhythm of industrial power. And in that arena, America was untouchable. Back in Michigan, the workers of Willow Run never heard these confessions. They only knew that each bomber they built carried hope across the Atlantic. Each rivet was a promise. Each completed aircraft was another step toward victory. The Germans could not comprehend it, but the truth was simple. America's strength lay not only in its soldiers, but in its ability to outproduce, outlast, and overwhelm. Spring 1945. Europe lay in ruins. Columns of smoke rose from shattered cities, and the thunder of artillery was fading into silence. The war was ending, but the memory of Willow Run's miracle was only beginning. In England, airfields stood crowded with liberators, their wings stretching across the horizon. Many had flown their last missions, scarred by flak and riddled with bullet holes. Yet behind every battered fuselage was the story of a factory in Michigan that had made the impossible routine. German officers, now prisoners of war, spoke openly of their disbelief. "We could not understand it," one admitted to Allied interrogators. "We thought America exaggerated. But when we saw the endless bombers, we knew the truth. You built them faster than we could destroy them." Back home, the workers of Willow Run began to return to their lives. The factory that had once pulsed with the rhythm of war fell quiet. Some returned to farms, others to schools, others to Ford's automobile lines. But they carried with them the pride of knowing they had forged victory not with rifles, but with rivets. Historians would later call Willow Run the beating heart of the arsenal of democracy. It was proof that wars are not only won on battlefields, but in factories, in the hands of ordinary men and women who rise to extraordinary challenges. For America, the lesson was clear. Industrial might was as decisive as military strategy. For Germany, the shock of Willow Run lingered, a reminder that no matter how fierce their soldiers fought, they could never match the relentless tide of production that rolled from a mile-long factory in Michigan. And for the crews who flew the liberators, every mission carried the echo of Willow Run's achievement. Each bomber was not just steel and firepower. It was the embodiment of a nation's resolve, a symbol of what happens when ingenuity, unity, and determination converge. The war ended, but the legend of Willow Run lived on.